Hello, how are you? My name is John. I'm a Mohawk from the Mohawk Nation, from the Wolf Clan. I grew up in Six Nations, and I'm very aware of the problems that exist in reservations all around Turtle Island or Canada. And I want to ask you about human rights. You're talking about international presence with Canada. And I've done a little research, and from my understanding, Canada is like somewhere around number 3 when it comes to human rights. But when you put Aboriginal people in that equation, they go down to like 43 or something. So my question to you, as someone who's going to be taking on this role to be a leader to Canada, how does that make you feel that human rights, when you don't include Native people, Canada's number 3, but when you include Native people, they're number 43, or something along that lines? How does that make you feel? And what are you going to do to change this? Because this is something that's very, very important for Canada. If you're talking about an international perspective, this is very, very important. And as someone who is Haudenosaunee, I'm looking forward to working together with people to change this. No matter if you're white, if you're black, it doesn't matter if you're Christian. It doesn't matter who you are, because when it all comes down to it, we are all human beings. It doesn't matter. We all live off the same earth, the Mother Earth, and we need to live side by side. And it doesn't seem this is going on in Canada at this point, because there's a lot of neglection. So to the issues that are going on the reservation. So what are you going to do to change it, and how does that make you feel with that being the facts right now?
That's a great question, and I particularly rather welcome you to here, and thank you for your contribution. The Mohawk Nation has made mighty contributions to the national life of our country.
War of 1812, for sure.
The War of 1812. And going back before to Joseph Brant and the enormous leadership that your people have brought to our country for hundreds of years. So that's the first thing. Acknowledge the huge contribution of Mohawk Nation and other First Nations to our national life. You asked me a question about how I feel. Let me tell you a story about how I feel. One of the times, and I'm extremely proud and passionate Canadians, but one of the times I felt bad to be a Canadian was when I went up to northwestern Ontario, Sioux Lookout, about 6 weeks ago, and I asked the nurse in the local hospital, "How's diabetes around here?" And she said, "We have the worst diabetes rates in the world. 1/3 of the population in northwestern Ontario has serious diabetes problems." I didn't feel good about that. This is diabetes heavily concentrated in Aboriginal populations who use that health center. You don't want to have the world record for diabetes if you're a proud country, right? So you ask, why does our human rights record go from 3 to 43 if you factor in Aboriginals?
Something along those lines, yeah.
It's because of these kind of problems. Endemic diabetes. And then you get diabetic amputation, so you fly into reserve communities, and when you get off the plane, everybody being loaded onto the plane is in a wheelchair. And why are they in the wheelchair? Because they've lost their legs, because diabetic amputation. That is our country. So you ask me how I feel terrible about it. But feeling terrible about it isn't good enough. We've got to do something about it. We've got to rebuild community health centers in reserve communities. We've got to train young Aboriginal women and men to be doctors and nurses in their own communities. We have got to close the gap between what we invest in Aboriginal education and non-Aboriginal education. There's another thing I don't feel good about. You look at the numbers and what we invest in Aboriginal students and non-Aboriginal students, it's a violation of the equality principles of Canada. A kid's a kid's a kid. Everybody wants to learn. Everybody has the right to the same per capita funding right across the board. And I'll tell you straight, we don't do that. There's a gap between what we invest in Aboriginal kids and what we don't. Another problem, and again, that's something we have to close that gap. The Liberal Party is committed to close the gap in funding between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children in Canada. We're committed to improve the healthcare system. We have a good record through the Kelowna process. We sat down with all the Aboriginal leadership in the country. We agreed some benchmarks on how to close these gaps in education, health, and housing. And then Mr. Harper won the election, and that just got swept away in, if I may call it, a political tsunami. And we're still recovering. So what I can commit to you is that we are going to close the gaps on Aboriginal education, and we're going to close the gaps on Aboriginal health. And that means we have to spend some more money. But it also means asking Aboriginal leadership to step up with us, do it together. Nothing can be imposed from Ottawa. We've got to sit down with your generation of leadership, say, okay, how do we actually get this done? Because we want to live with each other. I want to be able to look you in the eye and say, an Aboriginal Canadian has the same chances in their lives as my kids. It's not so right now. That's the problem. That's the gap we have to close, and I'm willing to work with you and all the young Aboriginal leadership to get it happening. Thank you.